Captain Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Taeguk, watching the stars through the main view screen. The silence around him felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. His crew worked quietly at their stations, but everyone could feel something bad was coming. The communication system suddenly came alive with a sharp beep. The face of Admiral So-Young Kim appeared on the screen. Her eyes were red, and her voice shook as she spoke. "Hyunwoo, they voted," she said. "All of them. Every single species in the Galactic Council voted yes." Hyunwoo felt his heart sink. "What does that mean for us?" "It means Earth is now classified as a Class X aggressive species. We are to be enslaved." The vote was 847 to 0. The bridge went completely quiet. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The words hung in the air like poison. So-Young had spent 6 months on Nexus Prime Station, the giant space station where the Galactic Council met. She had tried everything to convince them that humans were peaceful. She had shown them Earth's art, music, and literature. She had talked about human kindness and love. She had begged them to see that humans just wanted to live in peace. But it was no use. The alien species had already made up their minds. Dr. Tae-min Lee, Earth's top expert on alien life, had been studying the Council species for years. He appeared on the screen next to So-Young, his face pale and worried. "Captain, I think I know why they voted this way," Tae-min said. "It's not because they think we're evil. It's because they're scared of us." "Scared? Of humans?" Hyunwoo asked. "Yes. We adapt too fast. We learn too quickly. We never give up when things get hard. Other species see a problem and accept it. Humans see a problem and find a way to fix it. That terrifies them." Tae-min pulled up data on his tablet. "Look at this. In just 200 years, we went from riding horses to flying in space. Most species take 10,000 years to do the same thing. We're too fast, too creative, too stubborn. They can't control us the way they control other species." So-Young nodded sadly. "The council leader, a creature called Velith Prime, told me something before the vote. He said humans have a disease called hope. He said hope makes slaves useless because they always try to escape. So instead of killing us, they want to use us," Hyunwoo said. "Exactly. They want human soldiers for their armies. They want human workers for their factories. They want human minds to solve their problems. But they want us as slaves, not as equals." The communication system beeped again. This time, President Ji-Hai Choi appeared on the screen. She looked calm, but her eyes burned with anger. "Captain Park, Admiral Kim, Dr. Lee," she said. "I've been listening to your conversation. The Council ships are already moving toward Earth. They think this will be easy." "What are your orders, Madam President?" Hyunwoo asked. "We're going to show them what happens when you try to cage a human," Ji-Hai said. "Activate Protocol Prometheus. It's time for the Great Liberation." Protocol Prometheus was Earth's most secret plan. Only a few people knew about it. If Earth was ever attacked by a force too strong to fight directly, humans would scatter across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. They would disappear into space and start their own colonies far from Earth. But this wouldn't be a retreat. This would be the beginning of something bigger. "The Council thinks they understand us," Ji-Hai continued. "They think we're just another species they can break and control. They're wrong. We're going to teach every slave in the galaxy what freedom means." Tae-min leaned forward. "Madam President, are you saying we're going to start a war?" "No, Dr. Lee. We're going to start a revolution." The next few hours moved very fast. All across Earth's space, human ships began jumping to hyperspace. Colony ships, military vessels, research stations, and trading ships all disappeared into the darkness between stars. Each ship carried a piece of human knowledge, human culture, and human determination. Hyunwoo watched as ship after ship vanished from his sensors. The Earth Defense Force was spreading out across the galaxy, but they weren't running away. They were positioning themselves for the biggest fight in galactic history. "Captain, we're receiving our assignment," his communications officer said. Hyun Woo looked at the orders on his screen. The Taeguk was heading to the Outer Rim, to a system where an aquatic species called the thalassans had been slaves for 300 years. Their masters were crystalline beings who treated the water-dwelling thalassans like simple animals. "Sir, what's our mission?" his first officer asked. "We're going to free some slaves," Hyun-woo said, "and we're going to teach them how to fight back." Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime Station, the Council species were celebrating. They had finally solved the human problem. Soon, Earth would be under their control, and humans would be working in their mines and fighting in their armies. Velith Prime, a creature made of swirling gas and light, addressed the Council. "The human homeworld will be ours within days. Their primitive weapons cannot stop our combined fleets." But deep in the station's computer systems, something was wrong. Human hackers had been busy during So Young's 6 months of negotiations. They had planted viruses and programs throughout the Council's networks. These programs were sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. As the Council fleets approached Earth, they found something they didn't expect. The planet was empty. Cities stood abandoned. Factories were shut down. The only things moving were automated defense systems that attacked anything that came too close. And everywhere, on every screen and communication channel, the same message played over and over. "You voted to enslave us. You thought we would bow down and accept chains. You were wrong. We are humans and we bow to no one. Every slave in the galaxy will know freedom. Every tyrant will face justice. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when pushed too far. Now you'll learn." The Council had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had united humanity against them. They had given humans a cause worth fighting for, and they had no idea what was coming next. In the darkness between stars, human ships traveled toward distant worlds where beings lived in chains. The Great Liberation had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months had passed since the humans disappeared from Earth. The Galactic Council thought they had won an easy victory, but now they realized how wrong they were. Humans hadn't surrendered. They had vanished like ghosts, and now strange things were happening all across the galaxy. Commander Dong Hyun Yoon crouched behind a crystal formation on the water world of Aquatica. His team of 12 humans moved silently through the underwater caves where the Thalassan slaves lived. The fish-like beings had been working in these mines for 300 years, digging out precious crystals for their crystalline masters. "Remember," Dong Hyun whispered into his communicator, "we're not just here to free them. We're here to teach them how to stay free." The Thalassans were beautiful creatures with silver scales and large, intelligent eyes. But centuries of slavery had broken their spirits. They swam slowly through the water, carrying heavy loads of crystals in nets that cut into their fins. Dong Hyun's team struck fast. The crystalline guards were tall, sharp beings made of living crystal. They thought they were unbeatable because their bodies could cut through most materials. But humans had studied them carefully. The crystals had a weakness. A specific sound frequency could shatter them. The humans used sonic weapons that made no noise to other species, but created vibrations that turned the crystalline guards into powder. In 10 minutes, the mine was free of guards. But the Thalassans didn't celebrate. They huddled together in fear, waiting for punishment. "It's okay," Dong Hyun said, using a translation device. "We're here to help you." An old Thalassan with scars across his fins swam forward. "Help? What is help? Masters will return. Masters will punish." "Not anymore," Dong Hyun said. He pulled out a sonic weapon and handed it to the old Thalassan. "This will protect you. But first, you need to learn how to use it." For the next week, the humans taught the Thalassans everything. How to use weapons, how to organize their people, how to fight together, how to think like free beings instead of slaves. The old Thalassan, whose name was Reef Singer, learned fastest. "Why do you help us?" he asked Dong Hyun one day. "Because everyone deserves to be free," Dong Hyun said. "And because we know what it's like when others try to make you a slave." When more crystalline ships arrived, they found something they had never seen before. The Thalassans fought back. They used teamwork and strategy. They protected each other. They won. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Pharos, engineer Hai Wan Song was leading a different kind of mission. This planet was covered in factories, where the insect-like Kithra forced bear-like Ursans to work 20 hours a day building weapons and machines. The Kithra were smart and organized, but they made one big mistake. They thought like a hive mind, where everyone followed orders without question. They couldn't understand human creativity and independence. Hae-won and her team didn't attack the factories directly. Instead, they snuck into the power systems and computer networks. They left small devices that would activate later. "The Kithira think strength comes from control," Hae-won told her team. "We're going to show them that strength comes from freedom." The Ursans were huge, powerful beings, but years of slavery had made them afraid to fight. Hae-won's team made contact with Clawrender, a young Ursan who still had fire in his eyes. "We can't fight," Clawrender said sadly. "Too many have tried. The hive punishes entire families when one rebel acts." "What if you didn't have to fight? Alone?" Hae-won asked. "What if every Ursan on every factory world rose up at the same time?" She showed him the plan. The devices her team had planted would shut down the factories all at once. At that moment, the Ursans would take over. The humans had prepared weapons, communication systems, and detailed plans for each factory. "But we don't know how to lead," Clawrender said. "You'll learn," Hae-won replied. "We'll teach you, but first, you have to want to be free more than you're afraid of being punished." On the day of the uprising, everything happened perfectly. All across Pharos, factories went dark. Confused Kithara workers found themselves trapped in their own buildings while armed Ursans took control. The revolution spread to other worlds. Soon the mighty Kithara Empire was collapsing as their slaves became their masters. But the most shocking discovery came from Dr. Seok Jin Nam on the prison world of Gehenna. This planet was supposed to be where the worst criminals in the galaxy were kept. But as Nam investigated, he found something horrible. Most of the prisoners weren't criminals at all. They were political prisoners, scientists who asked too many questions, artists who created the wrong kind of art, and leaders who spoke about freedom. "This entire world is a lie," Nam reported to Earth's underground command. "The Council has been disappearing anyone who might threaten their power. They've been doing this for thousands of years." Nam's team began recording everything. They interviewed prisoners, collected documents, and gathered proof of the Council's crimes. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Council wasn't just enslaving species for labor. They were systematically destroying any culture, idea, or individual that might inspire others to think freely. They had been doing this for so long that most species had forgotten what freedom even meant. "We need to show this to everyone," Nam said to his team. "Every being in the galaxy needs to see what the Council really is." As the humans spread across the galaxy, their message was always the same. Any species that kept slaves would face human anger. Any species that wanted freedom would have human protection. The Council tried to fight back, but they were confused. They had never faced an enemy like this. Humans didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for ideas, and ideas were impossible to kill. Captain Hyunwoo Park received reports from all across the galaxy. Human teams were freeing slaves on dozens of worlds. Former slaves were joining the fight and freeing others. The revolution was growing faster than anyone had expected. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're getting a message from the Council. They want to negotiate." Hyunwoo laughed. 6 months ago, they voted to enslave us. Now they want to talk. Tell them we'll negotiate when every slave in the galaxy is free." But the humans weren't just fighting. They were building something new. On every world they liberated, they left behind teachers, doctors, engineers, and organizers. They helped former slaves create their own governments, armies, and societies. The Thalassans developed underwater cities that were beautiful beyond imagination. The Ursans built factories that actually helped their workers instead of hurting them. Other species began to remember technologies and cultures they had lost centuries ago. And everywhere, the same message spread from world to world. The humans came not as conquerors, but as liberators. They showed us that freedom is not a gift given by masters, but a right taken by the brave. The Council realized too late what they had done. By trying to enslave humanity, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the galaxy for thousands of years. They had awakened the desire for freedom, and that desire was spreading like wildfire, burning away the chains that had bound countless species for so long. The humans had kept their promise. The great liberation had begun, and there was no stopping it now. 2 years had passed since the humans scattered across the galaxy. What started as small rescue missions had grown into something the Council never expected. The galaxy was burning with revolution, and everywhere the Council looked, they saw their power crumbling. Captain Minho Kang stood on the bridge of the Thalassan battleship Deep Current. The ship moved through space like a great fish swimming through an ocean. Its hull was smooth and curved, designed by Thalassan engineers who had learned to combine their natural understanding of water flow with human technology. "Captain, we're approaching the crystalline home system," his second-in-command reported. The Thalassan's voice bubbled through the water-filled bridge, translated by human-built communication systems. Minho smiled as he looked at his crew. 2 years ago, these beings had been slaves, too scared to even look their masters in the eye. Now they commanded warships and planned military strategies that would make human generals proud. "Remember what we taught you," Minho said. "The crystallines. Think in straight lines. They believe the strongest crystal always wins, but you know better now." The Thalassan fleet moved in patterns that looked like schools of fish swimming through space. Their ships curved and flowed around the crystalline defense platforms, avoiding the enemy's powerful crystal beam weapons. Instead of attacking head-on, they struck from unexpected angles, using tactics that no crystalline mind could predict. "Now!" Minho commanded. Hundreds of Thalassan ships released sonic torpedoes all at once. The weapons didn't explode like normal bombs. Instead, they sent out sound waves that made the crystalline ships vibrate at their natural frequency. The mighty crystal warships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries began to crack and shatter like glass. Within hours, the crystalline hegemony's home fleet was destroyed. The beings who had enslaved the Thalassans for 300 years found themselves surrounded and defeated by their former slaves. But Minho didn't want revenge. The humans had taught the Thalassans something more important than hatred. "Send a message to the crystalline leaders," he ordered. "Tell them we offer them the same choice they never gave us. Surrender and live free, or keep fighting and be destroyed." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. General Unji Bey coordinated what the humans called the Underground Railroad. This wasn't a real railroad, but a network of secret routes that moved freed slaves from dangerous worlds to safe ones. Unji worked from a hidden base built inside an asteroid. The base was surrounded by defense platforms and protected by ships from 20 different species. Former slaves had become her most trusted soldiers and advisors. "General, we have reports from the Outer Rim," her aide, a bird-like Avianan named Windcaller, announced. 3 more systems have joined the Free Galaxy Alliance. The plant people of Verdana have driven out their robotic oppressors. Yunji nodded as she studied the galactic map. Green dots showed free worlds. Red dots showed Council-controlled territory, and yellow dots showed systems currently fighting for freedom. Each day, more red dots turned green. "The Council is getting desperate," she said. "They're pulling their fleets back to protect their core worlds. That means they're abandoning their outer territories." "Is that good or bad?" asked Ironbreaker, an Urson who had become one of Unji's best tactical planners. "It's good for the slaves in those systems," Unji replied. "But it means the Council is preparing for a final battle. They're going to make their last stand." The proof of this came when Ambassador Velith Prime, the gas creature who led the Council, requested a meeting with human representatives. The meeting took place on Haven's Rest, a neutral space station that served as a refuge for freed slaves and other beings fleeing the war. Colonel Wu Jin Han represented humanity at the meeting. He was a calm, quiet man who had spent his whole life fighting for others. Beside him sat representatives from a dozen freed species, all of them former slaves who now spoke as equals. Velith Prime appeared as a swirling cloud of colored gas contained in a transparent suit. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind blowing through leaves. "Colonel Han," the ambassador said, "this war has gone far enough. Billions have died. Whole star systems lie in ruins. Surely we can find a peaceful solution." "You're right," Han replied. "Billions have died. But they died as slaves, murdered by masters who saw them as property. We're here to make sure no one else dies that way. The Council offers humanity protected status," Velith Prime continued. "Your species will be granted full citizenship. You will have seats on the Council. Your worlds will be defended by our fleets. All we ask is that you stop this rebellion and restore order." The other representatives leaned forward, waiting for Han's answer. This was the moment that would decide the future of the galaxy. Han was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Ambassador, let me tell you what I see when I look at you," he said. "I see a being whose entire civilization is built on the suffering of others. I see someone who thinks peace means going back to the way things were, when billions lived in chains, so that a few could live in comfort. You offer us protection now because you're afraid of us. 2 years ago, you voted to enslave us because you thought we were weak. But we're not fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every being your council has stepped on for thousands of years." Han stood up, and the other representatives stood with him. "You want to know our answer? Here it is. Every slave in the galaxy will be free. Every species will have the right to choose its own destiny. Every world will decide its own fate. That's not negotiable." "And if we refuse?" Velith Prime asked. "Then you'll learn what humans do to tyrants," Han replied. The meeting ended, and word spread quickly across the galaxy. The humans had rejected the Council's offer. The war would continue until every chain was broken. But the war was changing. It wasn't just humans fighting the Council anymore. The Thalassans commanded their own fleets. The Ursons had built their own armies. The Avianans controlled the communication networks. Dozens of other species had joined the fight, each bringing their own unique abilities and knowledge. Dr. Seok Jin Nam's evidence about the Council's crimes had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Beings who had never questioned their leaders suddenly realized they had been living under a lie. Even some Council species began to rebel against their own governments. The galaxy was splitting in two. On one side were the remaining Council loyalists, desperately trying to hold on to their power. On the other side was the Free Galaxy Alliance, growing stronger every day as more species joined their cause. And at the center of it all were the humans, the species that had been condemned to slavery but had instead become the galaxy's liberators. They had shown everyone that freedom wasn't something you asked for. It was something you took. The final battle was coming, and everyone knew it. The Council would make their last stand at Nexus Prime, their great space station where they had voted to enslave humanity just 2 years before. But this time, it wouldn't be humans standing alone against the galaxy. This time, the galaxy would stand with them. 5 years had passed since the fall of Nexus Prime. The great space station had been rebuilt and renamed New Haven, becoming the heart of something the galaxy had never seen before, a true democracy where every species, no matter how small or different, had an equal voice. President Jin A. Lim of the Earth Republic stood at the podium in the Grand Assembly Hall. Around her, representatives from over 1,200 species filled the vast chamber. Some sat in chairs, others floated in special tanks, and some existed as pure energy contained in crystalline forms. The diversity was beautiful and overwhelming. 5 years ago, we were told that some beings were born to rule and others were born to serve, Ginny began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Today, we prove that every species in this galaxy has something valuable to offer. In the audience, former enemies sat side by side. Crystal Singer Vethel, who now led the reformed Crystalline Republic, nodded respectfully to Reef Singer, the Thalassan who had become his people's first elected leader. Nearby, Ironbreaker the Urson shared data tablets with Queen Node 7, the individual consciousness that had emerged from the old collective. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some former council species had struggled with the idea of equality. They had ruled for so long that they forgot how to live any other way. But slowly, with patience and help, most had learned to adapt. Admiral Cheng Su-yu watched the assembly from the security center of New Haven. His job was to make sure that nothing like the old council could ever rise again. The Never Again Initiative had created a galaxy-wide defense force, but this military was different from any that had come before. "Sir, we have reports from the Outer Rim Patrol," his aide reported. The aide was a young being from a species that had only been discovered after the liberation, a race of flying creatures called the Stellar Winds. "What's the situation?" Chang Su asked. The patrol found a small group of insectoid ships trying to re-establish slave camps on the abandoned world of Hive 7. The local defense force responded, but they requested human advisors to help with the negotiations. Chang Su nodded. This was still happening sometimes. A few beings from the old council species couldn't accept the new way of life. They tried to go back to the old ways of keeping slaves and controlling others, but now, instead of being ignored, their victims had protection. "Send Team Delta," he ordered. "Tell them to offer the insectoids the same choice we always offer. Join the Free Galaxy Alliance and live as equals, or face the consequences of trying to enslave others." Most of the time, the former oppressors chose freedom. When they saw how much better life could be when everyone worked together, they usually gave up their old ways. But some still had to be stopped by force. Dr. Sunmi Kwon led a different kind of mission. The Rehabilitation Corps helped former slave species rebuild their cultures and societies after generations of oppression. It was slow, careful work that required patience and understanding. "Dr. Kwon, the Verdanian plant people are ready to show us their newest discovery," her assistant announced. The assistant was a reformed crystalline named Harmony Shard, one of many council species members who had joined the rehabilitation effort. Sunmi followed Harmony Shard to a beautiful garden dome where the Verdanians had been working. These plant-like beings had been slaves to robotic masters for so long that they had almost forgotten how to grow properly. But with freedom and care, they had rediscovered abilities their ancestors had possessed. "Look," whispered Greensong, the Verdanian botanist, as she gestured toward a group of young trees. "They sing." The trees were indeed producing musical sounds as their leaves moved in the artificial breeze. It was hauntingly beautiful, a song that spoke of growth, hope, and new life. "My people once filled entire worlds with music," Greensong continued. "The robot masters said it was wasteful, so they made us silent. But now we remember. We are teaching the songs to other species so the music will never die again." This was happening all across the galaxy. Species were rediscovering arts, sciences, and technologies that had been lost or forbidden under council rule. The Thalassans had developed underwater cities that were marvels of engineering and beauty. The Avianans had created communication, networks that could carry messages instantly across the galaxy. The Ursans had built factories that helped workers instead of hurting them, creating products that made everyone's life better. And through it all, humans served as teachers, advisors, and protectors, but never as rulers. They had learned something important during their fight for freedom. True strength came not from controlling others, but from helping them become strong themselves. In the gardens of New Haven, a group of children played together under the light of 3 different suns. Among them was little Dae-ho, a human boy whose parents had been among the first liberation forces. He ran and laughed alongside children from dozens of different species, all of them friends despite their differences. They were playing a game they had invented called Freedom Tag. When someone was tagged, they didn't have to sit out. Instead, they got to help free other players who had been caught. The goal wasn't to win by eliminating others, but to make sure everyone could keep playing. "Why do you play this game?" asked Spark Dancer, a visiting Avianan diplomat who was watching the children. "Because it's more fun when everyone gets to play," Dae-ho replied, as if the answer was obvious. The diplomat nodded thoughtfully. The children understood something that had taken the adults years to learn. Freedom wasn't something you hoarded for yourself. It was something you shared with others, and the more you shared it, the stronger it became. As the day ended and the children went home to their families, the artificial stars of New Haven began to twinkle in the station's sky dome. Each star represented a world that had joined the Free Galaxy Alliance, and new stars were added every month as more species chose freedom over oppression. President Jin A. Lim stood on her balcony, looking up at those stars and thinking about the journey that had brought them all here. 5 years ago, the galaxy had voted to enslave humanity. They thought humans were just another species to be broken and controlled. They had been wrong about everything. Humans weren't special because they were stronger or smarter than other species. They were special because they refused to accept that anyone should live in chains. When faced with their own enslavement, they hadn't just fought for themselves. They had fought for everyone, and in doing so, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the galaxy for thousands of years, the understanding that all beings deserve to be free. The children's laughter echoed through the gardens as they played their game under the artificial stars. Freedom Tag had become popular on hundreds of worlds, a simple game that taught an important lesson. True victory came not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into friends. The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still problems to solve, conflicts to resolve, and healing to be done. But for the first time in thousands of years, every being had hope. They had the chance to choose their own destiny, to dream their own dreams, and to build their own future. The Council had voted to enslave Earth, thinking they were dealing with just another weak species. Instead, they had awakened the galaxy's conscience, and that conscience would never sleep again. In the end, the humans had kept their promise. The Great Liberation was complete. Everyone was free, and everyone would stay free as long as there were those willing to fight for freedom, and those wise enough to know that true strength came from lifting others up, not keeping them down. The final battle was about to begin. At Nexus Prime, the massive space station where the Galactic Council had once ruled the galaxy, the remaining loyal species gathered their forces for one last fight. They knew that if they lost here, their way of life would be over forever. Emperor Sarathk of the Reptilian Empire stood in the command center of Nexus Prime. His cold yellow eyes watched as thousands of ships moved into defensive positions around the station. Beside him, Collective Node 7 pulsed with electronic thoughts, coordinating the hive mind fleets that served the Council. "How many ships do we have?" Sarathk asked, his forked tongue tasting the air. 3,000 warships from 200. "Species," Node 7 replied, its mechanical voice echoing in the chamber. It is the largest fleet ever assembled. And how many ships does the enemy have? Unknown. They scatter and regroup constantly. Our estimates range from 500 to 5,000 ships. Sarathik hissed in frustration. The rebels fought like no enemy he had ever faced. They didn't follow normal military rules. They appeared out of nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before anyone could respond. Meanwhile, Admiral Byung-ho Jeon commanded the Liberation Fleet from the Bridge of the Free Galaxy, a massive ship built by 12 different species working together. The ship's hull showed the marks of its creators: Thalassan curves, Ursan strength, Avianan grace, and human engineering all combined into something beautiful and deadly. "Admiral, all fleets report ready," his communications officer announced. The officer was a young crystalline being named Shardsinger, one of many council species who had joined the rebellion when they learned the truth about their leaders. Byung-ho studied the tactical display. The council fleet was huge, but it was also predictable. They had formed a traditional defensive formation around Nexus Prime, just like human military textbooks said they would. "They're thinking like the old galaxy," he said to his staff. "They still believe that the biggest fleet wins. They don't understand that we're not just fighting with ships, we're fighting with ideas." The Liberation Fleet included beings from over 300 species. Former slaves fought alongside their former masters who had seen the error of their ways. Old enemies worked together toward a common goal. It was the most diverse military force in galactic history, but the real battle wasn't going to be won by ships and weapons. Dr. Eugene O had made a discovery that would change everything. Deep inside Nexus Prime was a machine that the Council had kept secret for thousands of years. The Psychic Suppression Network was a massive computer system that sent out invisible signals across the galaxy. These signals made beings more obedient, less curious, and afraid to think for themselves. This is how they controlled everyone for so long, Eugen explained to Admiral John over a secure communication link. The network doesn't just make beings obedient. It makes them forget what freedom feels like. It makes them think that being a slave is natural. "Can you destroy it?" Jian asked. "Yes, but I need someone to get inside the station. The network is protected by layers of security that can only be bypassed from the inside. That's where specialist Sang-Ho Lee came in. He was a small, quiet man who had spent his life sneaking into places where he wasn't supposed to be. Now he led a team of commandos from 6 different species, each one an expert at getting past enemy defenses. "Remember," Sang-Ho told his team as their small ship approached Nexus Prime, "we're not just trying to destroy a machine, we're trying to free every mind in the galaxy." The battle began with the largest space fight anyone had ever seen. Council ships fired their weapons in perfect formation, creating walls of energy that could destroy entire fleets. But the Liberation Fleet didn't fight like a traditional military force. The Thalassan ships moved like schools of fish, flowing around the enemy attacks. The Avianan fighters struck from above and below, using 3-dimensional tactics that confused the Council. Pilots, the Ursan battleships, charged straight through enemy lines, their thick armor protecting them as they delivered devastating close-range attacks. And everywhere, human ships coordinated the battle, using their natural ability to adapt and improvise. To counter every Council strategy, Emperor Sarathik watched in growing horror as his perfect defensive formation began to fall apart. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Our fleet is 3 times larger." "They fight as one," Node 7 observed. "Despite their differences, they move with perfect unity. It is illogical." "No," said a new voice. Ambassador Velith Prime had arrived in the command center, its gaseous form swirling with agitation. "It is not illogical. It is what we were always afraid of. They fight with hope." While the space battle raged outside, Sang-Ho and his team moved through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The station was huge, bigger than most cities, and filled with security systems designed to stop intruders. But the team had advantages the builders never expected. The crystalline member of the team could change her shape to fit through narrow spaces. The Avianan could fly through areas where others would have to climb. The plant being from Verdana could grow through cracks in the walls, and Sang-Ho himself could think like a human, which meant he could solve problems in ways that no council security system was designed to handle. "The network core is just ahead," he whispered into his communicator. "Dr. O, are you ready?" "Ready," Eugen's voice replied. "The moment you destroy the primary processor, I'll activate the virus program. Every being in the galaxy will be free from the network's influence." They reached the core chamber and found something unexpected. The psychic suppression network wasn't just a machine. It was a living creature, a massive brain-like organism that had been kept alive for thousands of years, forced to send out the signals that controlled other minds. "By the stars," breathed Wind Dancer, the Avianan team member. "They've been torturing this poor creature all this time." The creature's thoughts touched their minds, weak and desperate after centuries of slavery. It begged them to end its suffering. "We'll free you," Sang-Ho promised, "just like we've freed everyone else." He placed the explosive charges carefully, not to destroy the creature, but to break the machines that controlled it. As the charges detonated, the creature's thoughts became clear and joyful for the first time in millennia. And then it died, finally, at peace. The moment the network died, something incredible happened across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings suddenly felt something they had forgotten existed. They remembered what it was like to think freely, to question authority, to dream of something better. The effect on the Council fleet was immediate and devastating. Ship after ship began to turn away from the battle as their crews realized what they had been fighting for. Entire species that had served the Council for generations suddenly understood that they had been slaves just like everyone else. Emperor Sarathic felt the change in his own mind and fell to his knees in horror. "What have we done?" he whispered. "What have we become?" Collective Node 7's electronic thoughts went silent as the hive mind realized that individual consciousness was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. The Council's great fleet began to collapse from within. Some ships joined the Liberation Fleet. Others simply stopped fighting and drifted in space as their crews tried to understand their new freedom. Admiral Jean watched the battle end, not with destruction, but with awakening. "Open a channel to all ships," he ordered. His voice went out to every vessel in the system, Council and Liberation alike. "The war is over," he announced. "The psychic suppression network is destroyed. Every being in the galaxy is now free to choose their own path. We offer amnesty to all who lay down their weapons and join us in building a better galaxy." One by one, the Council ships powered down their weapons. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of freedom had begun.